We get to play and love what we do, and someone takes that and then they get their whole audience pumped up for their team to play.
James Hetfield doesn't hand out second chances. For more than 40 years, the Metallica frontman has been the unflinching face of heavy metal, writing the rules for how the music should be played and living by them without compromise. If you share the stage with him, you'd better bring discipline, authenticity, and respect for the craft. Cross those lines, and you're on the wrong side of his memory. Behind the stoic presence and earth-shaking riffs lies a man who's weathered betrayals, clashing egos, and chaotic tours, emerging with a clear sense of who belongs in his world and who doesn't. Some of these riffs were born in the heat of live shows, others in the quiet sting of personal history, but all of them left their mark. Today we're counting down 6 of Hetfield's most infamous musical feuds, ending with the one that started before Metallica's first record and still casts a shadow over metal history. Number 6. Guns N' Roses. What began as one of rock's most ambitious stadium tours quickly descended into one of its ugliest chapters. In the summer of 1992, Metallica and Guns N' Roses set out on a co-headlining run that promised historic nights and sold-out crowds. Instead, it gave fans the infamous Montreal meltdown. On August 8th, during Fade to Black, a pyro cue misfired, sending a wall of flame across James Hetfield's arm and face. The burns were severe enough to force him off stage mid-show, but Metallica's crew assured the audience the night wasn't over. Guns N' Roses would take over. It was their chance to save the night. Instead, they came on late. And when they finally did, Axl Rose complained about monitor issues, cut the set short, and walked off. Tens of thousands of furious fans turned the stadium into a war zone, tearing up seats, smashing windows, and clashing with police. The headlines the next day weren't about the music, they were about the riot. Lars Ulrich would later call the tour frustrating, but those close to Hetfield say his private reaction was sharper. One crew member remembers him muttering, "We got hurt, they got bored, and the fans got screwed." Since that night, Metallica and Guns N' Roses have occasionally crossed paths on festival stages, but a full-scale tour has never happened again. For Hetfield, Montreal wasn't just a bad night, it was proof that not every band can be trusted when the show must go on. Number 5. Megadeth. It's the rivalry that rewrote thrash metal history. In April 1983, just days before Metallica was set to record their debut album Kill 'Em All, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Cliff Burton made one of the most brutal calls in rock. They fired guitarist Dave Mustaine. The reasons were a combustible mix, volatile behavior, substance abuse, and constant clashes that threatened to tear the band apart before they'd even begun. Mustaine was put on a bus from New York back to Los Angeles, a 4-day ride to dwell on what he'd lost. By the time he stepped off, his mission was clear: start a new band and prove Metallica wrong. That band was Megadeth. From the moment Megadeth hit the scene, the tension was palpable. Interviews in the 80s and 90s were peppered with jabs and score settling, as Mustaine reminded the world of the role he played in Metallica's early years and the fact that he'd been cut loose. Hetfield, for his part, stayed focused on Metallica's rise, keeping a careful distance from his former bandmate. The most personal moment came 2 decades later, captured in the documentary Some Kind of Monster. Sitting across from Lars Ulrich, Mustaine admitted, "Getting fired from Metallica ruined my life." Hetfield's reaction was measured sympathy mixed with the unspoken belief that the choice in 2083 had been the right one. Even the Big Four concerts in the early 2000s where Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax shared the stage didn't fully erase the rivalry. The history was simply too heavy. For Hetfield, the Megadeth chapter is more than a feud, it's the original fracture. The one that proved his first loyalty will always be to Metallica's survival, no matter the cost. Number 4. Kiss. Behind the makeup, the pyro, and the endless merchandising lies one of James Hetfield's longest-running philosophical divides. To him, Kiss has always represented the kind of spectacle-over-substance approach that Metallica set out to destroy from day one. The roots of that clash stretch back to the 1980s, when Kiss was dominating arenas with choreographed shows and a merchandising empire that turned their brand into an empire of lunchboxes, action figures, and Halloween costumes. For Hetfield, then a rising thrash purist, this wasn't the raw, dangerous energy that defined real heavy music. In interviews, he and Lars Ulrich frequently lumped Kiss in with the glam metal acts they derided as all image, no music. One story from a late 80s industry event has become part of the lore. Gene Simmons reportedly approached Hetfield with advice on marketing the band better. Hetfield's alleged reply was instant. "I'm marketing music, not lunchboxes." That single sentence summed up the gulf between them. Metallica was built on riffs and grit, not costume changes and collectible figurines. Musically, the two bands couldn't be more different. Kiss built stadium anthems designed for mass sing-alongs. Metallica crafted intricate, aggressive compositions that demanded focus and intensity. A producer who had worked with both acts recalled Hetfield once listening to a Kiss record and dismissing it as all show, no soul. While they've occasionally appeared on the same festival bills, a full-scale co-headlining tour has never happened and likely never will. For Hetfield, Kiss represents a kind of rock stardom that sacrifices authenticity for spectacle, and that's a trade he's never been willing to make. Number 3. Limp Bizkit. Metal purists versus nu metal upstarts. Few divides in heavy music have been as sharp in James Hetfield's world as the one that separated Metallica from Limp Bizkit. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Fred Durst's backwards cap, cocky swagger, and rap metal anthems were dominating MTV and festival main stages. But for Hetfield, this was the embodiment of a trend that stripped metal of its depth and turned it into a fashion statement. In a 2001 Playboy interview, Hetfield criticized a wave of bands that, in his words, were just some guy telling you his opinion instead of singing a remark widely interpreted as a shot across the bow of nu metal's biggest names, Limp Bizkit chief among them. According to a former tour crew member who worked at festivals where both bands appeared, Hetfield could often be found watching from the side stage with a look of quiet disapproval, muttering that anyone can shout singing takes something more. The musical differences were stark. Metallica's foundation was built on intricate riff work, dynamic structures, and vocal melodies that could carry the weight of the song. Limp Bizkit's formula leaned on chugging, simplified guitar parts, DJ scratches, and lyrical posturing, a recipe that, to Hetfield, prioritized attitude over musicianship. And then there was Woodstock 2099. Limp Bizkit's chaotic performance, later blamed in part for the riots that followed, only cemented Hetfield's view that the band's energy lacked control and responsibility. For a frontman who prides himself on delivering chaos within a disciplined framework, that was a deal-breaker. While the two bands never engaged in an open public war, the absence of any tour pairing speaks volumes. Hetfield never needed to name Fred Durst directly. His stance on nu metal's rise made it clear. In his eyes, some movements in music don't just fade away, they're better left buried. Number 2. Jason Newsted. Some of Hetfield's fiercest clashes didn't happen across the stage, they happened inside Metallica itself. By the early 2000s, bassist Jason Newsted had been in the band for over a decade, surviving the And Justice for All sessions, the Black Album Juggernaut, and the controversial Load era. But in 2001, his side project, Echo Brain, became the spark for a rupture no one saw coming. Newsted saw Echo Brain as a creative outlet, a way to explore sounds and styles outside Metallica's framework. Hetfield saw something else entirely, a breach of loyalty. In a blunt Playboy interview that year, he compared side projects to infidelity. "It's like cheating on your wife. If you've got time for that, you should be focusing on this." The disagreement wasn't about money or fame, it was about the core principle Hetfield had lived by since Metallica's earliest days. The band comes first, always. He feared that Echo Brain would divide focus, dilute energy, and distract from Metallica's forward momentum. Management reportedly supported Newsted's idea, but Hetfield pushed back hard, refusing to give it his blessing. Tensions grew until, in January 2001, Newsted announced he was leaving Metallica. Fans were stunned. Metallica had survived lineup changes before, but losing a member over a philosophical dispute was different. In the documentary Some Kind of Monster, Hetfield admitted the split was painful, even as he stood by his decision. This wasn't a public war of words. There were no screaming matches caught on camera. But for Hetfield, the wound ran deep. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles aren't with rivals, they're with the people you share the stage with every night. Number 1. The LA glam scene. For James Hetfield, the Sunset Strip in the 1980s wasn't just another music scene, it was enemy territory. While Metallica were grinding through the Bay Area thrash circuit, bands like Motley Crue, Rat, and Bon Jovi were ruling MTV with teased hair, spandex, and glossy videos. To Hetfield, This wasn't metal, it was marketing with guitars. His disdain wasn't subtle. In interviews, he regularly mocked glam, metal's obsession with image, once joking on the Howard Stern show that Metallica were far too ugly to look like women. And then there was the now legendary white Jackson King V guitar he played in the late 80s, plastered with a sticker reading, "Kill." Bon Jovi, you haven't got a prayer. It was more than a joke. It was a declaration of war on what he saw as the plastic side of rock. Part of the tension was cultural. Glam bands often had major label backing, choreographed videos, and a polished, party-ready image. Metallica's rise was built on underground tape trading, grueling tours, and music that was aggressive, complex, and defiantly unpretty. Hetfield saw glam metal's success as a distraction from the raw energy and authenticity that heavy music was supposed to deliver. Even Motley Crue, one of the heaviest of the glam acts, didn't escape the cold shoulder. While much of the open sparring came from Lars Ulrich and Nikki Sixx, Hetfield's blanket dismissal of the entire scene kept the temperature low between the camps. In his eyes, glam's danger was manufactured, the eyeliner and pyrotechnics were all surface, no soul. By the early 90s, grunge had wiped glam off the charts, and Metallica were at the peak of their powers with the Black Album. For Hetfield, it was vindication. The thrash ethic had outlasted the glitter, and decades later, his stance hasn't softened proof that some rivalries aren't about one band or one incident, but about defending an idea of what rock should be.